It's 11:02, so we'll get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Tabitha, and I am the West Coast Regional Appraisal Manager with the Fine Art Group. I also have a background in conservation, disaster response in relation to fine art and collectibles. Rick, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Rick Worm, of course. I am Hagerty's loss control mitigation specialist. So I'm involved with conducting site inspections for our clients, and then also kind of being there as a consultant for our team with any kind of loss control issues, at cat exposure situations, wildfire, all that kind of stuff. So.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Rick, and thanks to everyone for joining the discussion. We're going to be talking about how to mitigate risk before a disaster hits in relation to cars, art, and collectibles. With the increased threat of natural disasters, at the Fine Art Group, we're constantly hearing from clients and insurance brokers that are located in high-risk locations. How do they create a plan? However, even if you're not based in a hurricane or fire-prone zone, really anything can happen. So it's really important to be prepared. We see, the burden of proof is really the client's responsibility in a loss scenario. So it really is crucial that collectors get a handle on how to mitigate any risk beforehand so that they don't find themselves in an unfortunate scenario later on. Wildfires, hurricanes, and tornadoes aside, Rick, what are some potential exposures that collectors can face?
Sure. So, storing collectible cars or anything else collectible is a lot more than just, finding a decent building and, closing the door and calling it good. Especially recent years, there's a huge increase in the frequency and magnitude of natural disasters, such as things you mentioned, wildfires, earthquakes, that sort of thing. We've also, got, unprecedented rain events like in Texas currently right now. So flood exposures where people don't normally think of those. You have tornadoes and those sort of things that just can really happen almost anywhere. But in addition to that, you've got some of the unfortunate rioting from civil unrest in various cities that we've had, where you've probably seen the news where people are just kind of torching buildings, random buildings. So just all those kind of things. In addition to that, just your normal hazards in a facility, flammables, incorrect usage or storage, extension cord overuse, overloaded circuits, and then things, signs like the, neon signs hanging from the ceiling that aren't properly secured and can end up dropping and causing damage to a car or any other collectible. So just there's a wide range of things that maybe people don't always think about. Tabitha, maybe you can walk through a couple of scenarios where a client has been unprepared versus a client that did have a plan of action in place.
Yeah, definitely. You brought up some really good points. I think that there are so many different kinds of scenarios that can happen to someone. So some people sometimes don't really think that this situation can happen to them until it does. So I have worked, I mentioned, in conservation disaster response. So I've worked with clients in my current role on the front end on mitigating those kinds of risks. And then I've also worked on the back end with clients who have experienced a house fire, et cetera. One client in particular that I worked with, they initially felt that they were prepared for the situation. So they had a electrical house fire on the first floor, unpreventable, preventable in some senses, but it just kind of a random occurrence. The entire living room, though, was completely destroyed, and most of the front rooms in the residence were completely singed with fire and soot. And then, with fire in a home, there is also the issue with smoke damage as well as water damage when the firefighters come in to remediate. So everything essentially on the first floor was completely damaged. The client did have blanket insurance coverage and they had a scheduled itemized listing, but unfortunately they hadn't had any updated appraisals in over 10 years. So none of the values were up to date. The client also felt that they were prepared because they kept great paper records of their collection, but in the fire, everything was destroyed. So they had no records of the collection, invoices, any provenance information. That was all lost. That wasn't a big issue because the burden of proof really falls on the client. So they didn't have, accurate retail replacement values for today's market, and they were really left in a bad situation where they were not financially they were not made whole financially after the loss. So on top of having to deal with the emotional toll that having a fire in your residence can have, they also were not made whole due to improper coverage, which could have been avoided if they had kept up to date and made sure that they were creating a plan. Another example of a client that I've worked with that was more prepared for a situation was a client that I worked with back in like 2017. We created an evacuation plan for them. So they had two homes. One was in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. The other home was in upstate New York. And what inspired the client to create a plan of action for their beach home in Myrtle Beach was they experienced Hurricane Sandy a few years before that, and they wanted to make sure that they were prepared for anything in Myrtle Beach. The client only lives in Myrtle Beach, May through August. So what we did was we created a plan to preemptively pack out the high valuable artwork pieces both while they were not in the home. So a local storage and fine art handling company would come in, pack out the collection, put it into climate controlled storage during those months, September through March-ish, while they were not in the home and living there. And then when they returned back in May, the art handling team would reinstall everything exactly how it was so that the client could enjoy their collection while they were living in that residence. So thankfully, they had started this plan, like I said, in 2017. And then in 2018, Hurricane Florence came through and through that area, and they ended up having some flooding in their home, but thankfully most of their most valuable assets were all offsite, safe, completely out of harm's way. And the only issue that they had related to damage was the floors in their home. They had to, work with their insurance company on that, but they're really high valuable items. We had a plan in action and they were completely safe, thankfully. So that was a really good situation for them. Rick, do you have some recommendations and steps that you would recommend that collectors take to prepare for anything that could happen potentially?
Sure. And also just a little tidbit here is I also work full-time as a firefighter at EMT here in Michigan. So got a lot of firsthand experience, like Tabitha mentioned, smoke, water damage, that sort of thing. So I'm on the other end when I'm on my 24-hour tour.
Oh boy.
So, we see, everything from totally prepared to totally not prepared. So some big things, the obvious things, central station, fire and burglar alarming, those can buy you time, if there is a fire that starts when nobody's in the building, that gets an alarm rings to a call center who calls the appropriate 911 dispatch center and gets us on our way quicker. Same for if it's a burglar alarm. So a lot of people have only local alarms. So if you're not home or at the facility, you're not going to hear it. So central station is really important. And then things like the proper fire extinguishers mounted properly in the building. They, should be inspected every year and ready to go. So every town there are fire extinguisher service companies that can help determine what the appropriate extinguishers are and the number of them for a particular facility. And then flammables, there's a lot of DIY going on out there now, even with their car collections. So storing flammable liquids, whether it's gasoline, starting fluid, all kinds of different fluids should be in a UL listed storage container. So you can find these on Amazon, and a lot of different stores, Lowe's, Home Depot sell these flammables, and they're designed to keep fumes and everything in these contained cabinets. And if you are in an earthquake prone area like the West, flexible gas lines connecting to the building. One of the biggest things with earthquakes, which I realize we haven't had a large one recently, but fires resulting from natural gas leaks. And generally it's where the connection is going into the building. And then hanging objects, make sure if there's signs or anything else. Suspended forced air heaters are popular in storage facilities. Make sure these are properly braced. So if there were an earthquake or anything else happens, that these things are going to come crashing down. And then wildfire, have a plan in place. Same with hurricane, to evacuate the cars. Who you're going to call, where the cars are going to go. As far as the building itself, you want defensible space around the building. So a wildfire isn't going to come, into the shrubs and brush right up to your facility or your client's facility. And there's a lot of tips and that kind of stuff that we're happy to help, provide some insight to. And then after something happens, a lot of people will plan up to what happens, but you want to be prepared for the after. So after a fire, after a hurricane, if there's a hole in the roof or something, walls missing or flooding, do we have tarps on hand that we can quickly cover stuff to prevent further damage? Who do we call to, help remove debris off vehicles or your other collectibles in the facility? And then another big thing too, and this kind of goes on, we had a fire here just in the city I live in Traverse, at a collector car storage facility, kind of restoration shop / storage. The cars, just the way they're in there, when we get there, we'll have a team that will try to get collectibles or valuables, whether it's artwork, paintings, collectible cars out. This particular one, the vehicles, the way they were all stored, they weren't easily accessible to get them out of the building in the area where there was no fire. And also we couldn't find car keys. So, they make a key lock box that you can have in a place that store all the keys in it, and they're locked themselves. So, but having all those keys accessible in one place, just all that can help prepare yourself or your clients prepare for any kind of potential disaster, or something that sneaks right up, especially like a wildfire where you don't have the 3 days notice like you do in a hurricane or any other fire. Tabitha, what would you have recommended for an unprepared client to do differently?
Well, number one, that the client that I described, they didn't have their information backed up off-site on the collection. They also didn't have proper coverage. They didn't have a plan in place. And, it created a lot of difficulties navigating that process after the fact. So, my recommendations would definitely be, first, start with inventory management. Clients and collectors really need to know and have a handle on what they have. They should have those records stored digitally, off-site, in multiple locations, so that they can be accessed in these kind of scenarios. One service that the Fine Art Group helps clients and collectors with is we do inventory management. We'll catalog, put everything into our proprietary database. We also offer a visual inventory process where we document everything photographically in the home, and we keep records of that, send that to the insurance brokers to keep a file, as well as, the client collector themselves will have a copy of those files. And then after that, I would also recommend getting a handle once you understand the collection and what you have. You really need to make sure that you have updated appraisals. Something that's a benefit with working with us is that once we've done the appraisal one time for your entire collection, we offer complimentary annual reviews, and we alert all of our clients when they need to update their values and their valuation. So they don't have to they have peace of mind where they don't have to worry about making sure that everything's up to date. We're going to contact them and let them know when it's time to have a reappraisal done. And then I would also recommend just kind of figuring out what is going to be the formal evacuation plan based on their particular risks and their needs. And that, like you said, Rick, they need to think about all aspects of the process. So not only removal of any of the assets, but what are they going to do if they do find themselves in a loss situation? Do they have the appropriate conservators that are going to actually be able to safely and appropriately treat objects and conserve objects if necessary? And making sure that you're just working with the right people as well. You don't want a remediation company to come in too quickly and start putting humidifiers into a building that was flooded without getting the artwork out first, because that can cause serious damage to the collection. So just knowing what the priorities are, what the plan is, and working with somebody that can help you navigate that entire process. So I think a benefit with the Fine Art Group is that all of our clients that do have an evacuation plan, they work with one point of contact to navigate them through the entire process. So in these kinds of scenarios, there's a lot of people involved, it's overwhelming, but clients can at least have a peace of mind of knowing like they have their one go-to contact, and then that contact will kind of orchestrate the entire process. So those would be kind of my recommendations. And I know we're short on time now, so we kind of have to wrap up because this is only a 20-minute session. But I just wanted to kind of really quickly outline for everybody the top 5 takeaways from this forum. And please feel welcome to reach out afterwards if you have additional follow-up questions. Rick and I are always happy to help. You can contact us anytime. But I think the top 5 takeaways would be, yes, it can happen to you. And when it does, the burden of proof is on the owner. So you just want to be prepared. Number 2 would be create a plan, know your strategy, know your priorities, make sure you have all your ducks in a row. And then knowing and practicing your plan would be number 3. So you already have a plan, but you have to really know your plan. Who's involved? Who's executing your plan? Where are you going? Where is your artwork going? What location, etc. And then number 4 would be, of course, up-to-date appraisals and make sure your insurance is covering your current collection and those values. And then number 5 would be knowing what you have. Talk about, we need to make sure we have a handle on the inventory, whatever that collection may be, if it's collector cars, if it's collectible sculptures, whatever you may have, a wine collection. You really need to know exactly what's in your home. And that's going to be the best way to prepare you for the unexpected. Yeah. And Rick, if you have any last thing to add, otherwise we're, I think, at time.
Yep, I think that was great.
Yeah.
Well covered.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Rick, and thank you everyone for joining. Again, please feel welcome to reach out with any other questions. We'll also be sending out a newsletter in the near term about some more details on this particular topic if you're interested.